Okay, let's start with a question that sounds almost too simple. What is a book? I mean, really, you'd think we'd have that figured out by now, but it's a question that has stumped some of the greatest minds for centuries. So today, let's dive in and try to unravel that puzzle.
I mean, just look at these. Which one is a book? The classic hardcover? Sure. The Kindle? Probably. The audiobook on your phone? It gets tricky, right? In our world today, the lines are just so incredibly blurred. So where do we even begin to draw the line?
This is a paradox that the historian Roger Chartier really nailed. Think about a classic work like Don Quixote. We all know what it is, right? It's this one single, stable thing. But is it? You've got different translations, editions with different covers, movies, even ballets based on it. The core work feels permanent, but the text itself is constantly shifting and changing form. It's a real head-scratcher.
So, to figure this out, we can't just focus on the latest technology. The answer isn't in your Kindle. Nope, we actually have to go way back. We're talking about a philosophical debate that's over 200 years old and a technological revolution from 500 years ago. And it all starts with a question from a guy you've probably heard of.
All right, let's wind the clock back to 1798. The philosopher Immanuel Kant asked that same question we started with. What is a book? And his answer? Wow, it was a total game changer. It basically redefined how we think about writing and owning ideas.
So here's where Kant's genius really shines through. He says, hold on, a book isn't one thing. He argued it's actually two completely different things, all wrapped up together at the same time.
Okay, so on one hand, you've got the physical object, the paper, the ink, the glue, the thing you can hold. You can buy it, sell it, whatever. That's your property. But then there's the second part, and this is the crucial one, the discourse. That's the author's actual speech to the world. And Kant said, that's not a thing you can sell like a chair. It's an action, and it belongs to the author and the author alone.
This leads to a really key point. When a publisher prints a book, they aren't buying the author's words. It's more like they're getting a mandate, a permission slip. The author is basically saying, okay, you have my permission to share my speech with the public for me. The publisher is just a messenger. They never, ever truly own the message itself. And back then, that was a totally radical way of thinking.
Now, this whole idea of an author owning their discourse is a huge deal, especially when you think about the biggest invention in the history of books, the printing press. But the story of the printing press, well, it's not what you've probably been told. We have this mental image of old-timey print shops just cranking out Bibles in classic literature, right? And yeah, they did some of that, but that was like the smallest slice of the pie. The real money, it was in what we'd call job printing today. They were printing official forms, posters, flyers, and the real cash cow, indulgences for the church. Thousands and thousands of them.
Okay, so this brings us to a huge myth about the printing press. We always hear that print killed handwriting, right? That the machine made the pen totally obsolete.
Well, it's just not true. In fact, it was the exact opposite. The printing press created a massive boom in handwriting. Suddenly there was this explosion of new documents that all needed a personal touch. Just look at this stuff. Those indulgences needed a name written in. Certificates needed signatures. School books were printed with huge margins specifically for students to write notes in. It's this incredible pattern you see over and over with new tech. Instead of killing the old way of doing things, the new technology actually fueled it. It created more work for the pen, not less. So as this whole new world of printing is taking off, something else is changing too. The idea of the person who actually writes the text. They're going from being just a craftsman, like a scribe, to something much bigger, the author with a capital A.
And look, this didn't just happen overnight. It was a slow burn. You see it starting even before the printing press, with manuscripts dedicated to just one writer. Then the press comes along and helps lock in a text to a specific author's name. Fast forward to the 1700s, and people become obsessed with finding the author's original handwritten manuscript. And then, as we saw, Kant comes along and gives the author this solid legal and philosophical standing. It was a long journey.
Which brings us right back to where we started, to our question and to our own digital world. Because that relationship between the text, its physical form, and its author is being totally shaken up all over again.
You know, it's funny how history repeats itself. Back in the 16th century, people were freaking out about there being too many books. They were worried about a disorder of discourse. Does that sound familiar at all? It's literally the exact same fear we have today about information overload from the internet.
And this shift from print to digital is a really big one. Think about it. In the old world, the object itself told you what you were reading. A newspaper feels different from a hardcover novel. But on a screen, everything can look the same. And while a chapter in a physical book is obviously part of a bigger whole, online, you can just copy-paste that same chapter and it can exist all by itself, totally ripped from its original home. And that's what's so wild about the time we're living in. This is the first time in human history that the text has been completely separated from its physical body. A masterpiece of literature, a news article, a quick email to your boss, they can all appear on the exact same screen in the exact same format.
So this leaves us with a huge final question, a really provocative one for our time. If the text is no longer tied to the physical thing we call a book, then what happens to that whole idea of a stable, complete work? What happens to Kant's discourse? That, right there, is the puzzle that our digital world has handed us. And honestly, we're still trying to figure out the answer.